When they say Russia, I say China. That's what I've been saying about the threat posed from China every time the left gets in a tizzy about the former Soviet Union. The latest example, let me tell you about 35-year-old Ruping Liu. Already a billionaire, Mr. Liu is dubbed by the Chinese as the Chinese Elon Musk for his efforts to send people into space and his work on cutting-edge projects like jet-powered surfboards. Sounds like a creative guy. Where's he getting all these ideas? Well, reports that Mr. Liu simply stole intellectual property from one of America's most well-regarded scientists, David Smith of Duke University.
We know that the Chinese have a shopping list of intelligence and technology that they target every year. We know that the research that he took from Duke University was on that collection list, and we know that certain government officials and operatives met with him while he was in the United States.
They came in and took pictures and measurements of all the equipment and actually sent that back to China, is what I found.
Oh, take measurements and send it back to China. Joining me now for reaction is Dean Cheng, Senior Research Fellow at Heritage Foundation's Asian Studies Center. This is nothing new, but it still shocks me. He comes to Duke University, lawfully here. Suddenly, he's a big billionaire back home, and he has this cutting-edge technology that's Dr. Smith's.
Yep. Well, Mr. Liu basically said he came to Duke University specifically to work with that professor, that he'd been following his work for years, and he actually apparently brought several of his colleagues over as well to work on that professor's
How is this
project.
allowed? How do we continue to allow this, given how bad we've done, we've done to combat intellectual property theft in the United States?
So here's a couple of statistics to show you just how bad things are. There are 350,000 Chinese students in the United States.
All paying cash.
Yes, that is part of why they are here. Because for the University of California, they get $40,000 for a foreign student, only $13,000 from an in-state student. Is it any surprise that as a result, there are 6 times as many now Chinese students at Berkeley, for example, than there were just 10 years ago?
35% of all foreign students now in American universities are Chinese.
That's right.
Now, if you could devise a government policy on this, what would it look like?
I think there's a couple of things. One of the things, obviously, if you're a professor who is taking government money, particularly money from DARPA or DOD to do research, you obviously need to be very careful of who you accept, even on work and projects that aren't in turn funded by DARPA, because your computer system is potentially.
What's DARPA? What is that?
DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's the super high-tech secret warriors.
Oh, I love the acronyms in Washington. You hear these acronyms, no one knows what they mean, but I have to ask you. I don't know what
No, absolutely. But the other thing we need to do is we need to basically promote STEM, science, technology, and engineering and mathematics research in the United States. One of the reasons why we bring in so many foreign grad students is that Americans aren't willing to study STEM, and foreign students are.
Oh, well, the liberal arts. Everyone's doing, environmental science. Well, that's important. It's a good, and psychology. Whatever. What major are you? I'm a psych major. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, I'm majoring in English. Okay. Well, what are you going to do for work? How are you going to make money?
That's a fundamental problem.
Ivanka Trump's doing a big push on STEM for girls, and which I think is really important. She's really spending a lot of time on that, pushing that initiative. That's critical.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, you have professors, for example, at the University of Illinois who are pushing, you know what math is? Math is about grievance. It's about whiteness. And so therefore...
Whiteness?
Yes.
Like a whiteboard, maybe,
no.
Writing the equations on that I still don't understand.
So you wind up, foreign students come here wanting to do all the hard math and science and all that. And American students, too many of them are being taught by professors whose attitude is, you know what math is about? Math is about oppression.
Oh my goodness, scary. Thank you so much. We'll have you on again. This story is not going away. And when we come back, Michael Avenatti is like a squatter who just will not leave your television, ever. And now his hypocrisy is bad enough to shatter it. We'll explain in a moment. Finally tonight, a man who spent the past few months living in a cable news studio has suddenly gotten camera shy. After demanding transparency from President Trump on his alleged relationship with porn star Stormy Daniels, Michael Avenatti somehow convinced a federal judge to block the media from covering his testimony about his law firm's bankruptcy. His firm has defaulted on millions of dollars in debt and has fallen way behind on payroll taxes. So the closing question tonight is, what are you trying to hide, Mikey? Well, we're going to keep searching for the answer. Was he born with a microphone coming out of his chest? I mean, was that a genetic condition? That's all the time we have this evening, but have no fear. I got my wand. Shannon Bream and the Fox News at Night team are up next. Shannon.
All right, work your magic, Laura. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a great show.
We begin with the Fox News Alert. 3 major stories to break down for you tonight. First, the Trump administration calls it a big win. The president securing trade concessions from the European Union today, avoiding a potential trade war on that front for now. Senator Lindsey Graham joins us to weigh in on that and much more. Then, breaking tonight, House Republicans introduce articles of impeachment against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Will they vote before breaking for August recess? It's about to happen. Well, we'll ask Congressman Ron DeSantis when he's right here. And later, the president and his allies fighting back at his longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen, over a leaked conversation of the pair discussing a possible payment over the story of a Playboy model alleging an affair with the president. Former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, is here to tell us what he thinks that leaked tape is really all about. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We begin with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's appearance on Capitol Hill. Some lawmakers from both parties are expressing frustration with President Trump's foreign policy and a lack of information about that recent Trump-Putin-Helsinki summit. Late today, his top diplomat tried to reassure them. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has this report from Capitol Hill.
I personally made clear to the Russians there will be severe consequences for interference in our democratic processes.
Pompeo told members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee he's been firm with Moscow, saying sanctions won't be eased.
There will be no relief of Crimea-related sanctions until Russia returns control of the Crimean Peninsula to Ukraine.
The Foreign Relations chairman put Pompeo in an awkward spot by criticizing President Trump's behavior.
What is it that causes the president to purposely create distrust in these institutions?
You somehow disconnect the administration's activities from the president's actions. They're the one and the same.
I notice that you are not responding to what I'm saying.
There were some testy moments with the panel's top Democrat, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, on the Trump-Putin summit.
Senator, I'm telling you what he had a conversation with Vladimir Putin about. And I'm telling you what U.S. policy is today. I understand, Senator, I understand the game that you're playing.
No, Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, I don't appreciate you characterizing my questions. My questions is to get to the truth. We don't know what the truth is.
Menendez and Pompeo also sparred over North Korea.
Did they agree to end the production and enrichment of uranium and plutonium for military programs?
Senator, I would welcome the chance to respond to your questions. If you'd let me finish, it would be most
simple yes or no.
I think it'd be most illuminating for the folks watching.
It's a simple yes or no.
Following the high-profile Singapore summit with Kim Jong-un, Pompeo said the U.S. is pressing for results.
We're engaged in patient diplomacy, but we will not let this drag out to no end. I emphasize this position in the productive discussions I had with Vice Chairman Kim Young-chol.
Pompeo also highlighted how pressure from President Trump and his administration has led to NATO allies spending more and making the alliance stronger.
Last year's $14.4 billion in new spending was a 5.1% increase. It was the largest in a generation. 8 allies will meet the 2% this year. 18 are on track to do so by 24.
Several lawmakers argued there must be a price when Russia or others attack the U.S., such as the election meddling. And there were appeals from senators for the Trump administration to use all the sanctions available to teach Moscow a lesson. Shannon?
All right, Mike Emanuel for us on Capitol Hill. Thank you. Signs of a trade thaw tonight between the U.S. and Europe. Both sides are hailing an agreement in principle to work towards zero tariffs and zero subsidies on non-automotive products. What does it mean? Well, Garrett Tenney has late details on what it means for the broader trade initiatives promoted by the president. Good evening, Garrett.
Shannon, good evening. Good to be with you. This is not the trade deal that most folks, including those in the White House, were expecting to get today. After weeks of threatening each other with a full-blown trade war, today the U.S. and European Union did a 180.
This was a very big day for free and fair trade. Very big day indeed.
Together in the Rose Garden, President Trump and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker announced a wide-ranging agreement meant to stave off further trade hostilities between the U.S. and Europe. This deal is also a big win for President Trump because it includes just about everything he's been asking for. Both sides agreed to work towards zero tariffs on goods outside of the auto industry, no new tariffs as these negotiations play out, and to reassess the tariffs imposed over the past few months, including those on steel and aluminum, and to reform the World Trade Organization, as well as significantly, the EU agreed to buy more U.S. goods, including soybeans and natural gas.
When I was invited by the President to the White House, I had one intention. I had the intention to make a deal today, and we made a deal today.
This pivot towards the U.S. by the EU comes just a week after President Trump called the European bloc a foe of the U.S. and blasted Germany at the NATO summit over its multi-billion-dollar gas deal with Russia. The president striking a much different tone tonight, tweeting this picture of him and the EU commissioner hugging with the caption, "Obviously the European Union is represented by Juncker and the United States is represented by yours truly, love each other." This new deal also provides a bit of good news for America's farmers who've been hit by China's decision to buy soybeans and produce from other countries amid its growing trade dispute with the U.S. That is why the White House has been getting calls from a lot of Republican lawmakers who are nervous the president's strategy of using tariffs to get better trade deals may not end well. But tonight, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said today's deal is proof that the strategy is working.
I really think there would have been zero chance of this happening had it not been for the very firm tariff and trade policy the president put into effect.
Now, while the U.S. and EU are launching an executive working group to implement this new agreement, the two sides are also preparing new tariffs targeting billions of dollars in goods just in case these talks fall through. So lots of love today, but don't forget, we've got one in the chamber for you if this turns south.
All right. Garrett, thank you very much.
You got it.
Good look at it. Some Republicans are hammering the Trump administration on trade and Russia. So how does the Republican senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, feel? He sits on Senate Judiciary and Armed Services Committees, among many other things.
Yes.
Thanks for taking a break to come see us.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
I want to play a little bit of what the president had to say meeting in the Rose Garden today with the president of the European Commission about where we go on trade.
This will open markets for farmers and workers, increase investment, and lead to greater prosperity in both the United States and the European Union. It will also make trade fairer and more reciprocal. My favorite word, reciprocal.
So what do you think about what the president's doing on trade?
With the European Union, it could be a major breakthrough. Maybe the biggest change between us and Europe since the end of World War II, if he can pull it off. When it comes to China, they're the biggest cheater. The tariffs are hurting, but we got to experience some pain to bring about change. So I'm going to stick with the president. And if he can put a win on the board with Europe, then eventually Canada and Mexico, all of us turn our attention on China, be a home run.
And China, along with some others, they're obviously targeting middle America. A lot of people, farmers, agriculture people, they know have supported this president.
Right.
They're very precise about what they're doing.
Well, they are. And, you know, BMW makes BMW's largest plant's in Greenville, South Carolina. They sell 81,000 cars to China every year. There's a 40% tariff on cars made in Greenville going into China. That's hurting BMW. It's hurting Iowa farmers, but we got to push through it because China cheats. And if somebody doesn't bring them to heel, they can destroy our economy. So I'm willing to suffer through this, but I want the Europeans on our side. I want the Canadians and Mexico on our side against China. And you see the first step toward a unified approach toward China, beginning with Europe.
So you think there'll be short-term pain for long-term gain when it comes to these trade issues?
We've got to, yes, if we don't change the way China does business, they can put Boeing out of business, they can put BMW out of business, they can destroy the world economy because they have such power and they cheat and they steal intellectual property. So Trump's right about China. If he can put wins on the board with Europe, get a better NAFTA deal and focus on China, then he could be a historic president in terms of changing trade.
Okay, let's talk about Russia now. And let's start with the Secretary of State testifying on Capitol Hill before the Senate today. Here's what he said about the issue of Crimea.
I want to assure this committee that the United States does not and will not recognize the Kremlin's purported annexation of Crimea. We stand together with allies, partners, and the international community in our commitment to Ukraine and its territorial integrity.
Has this administration been tough enough on Russia?
They've been tougher than Obama, but the goal is to get Russia to change their behavior. Pompeo's an outstanding pick for Secretary of State. What they're doing with Iran is a game changer. Pompeo called out the Ayatollahs of enriching themselves at the expense of the Iranian people. The president is kind of being like Reagan toward the Soviet Union. Iran is an evil empire. And I think we can break the back of the regime, and the best way to do that is to help the people. But when it comes to Russia, I've got new sanctions, very hard hitting, because it's not just enough to be tougher than Obama. You got to get Russia to quit doing what they're doing. And if you believe Dan Coates, and I do, they're still trying to interfere in our elections in 2018. So I'm coming up with the sanctions from hell against Russia, and I hope the president will get behind it.
I know it's a bipartisan measure.
Yes, very bipartisan.
Okay, so we'll see where he goes on that. But as you said, very important that the secretary was speaking directly to the Iranian people this weekend in his remarks to them. Do you think they're getting the message through the leadership, that it obviously is at odds with its own people on many things?
For 8 years, Obama basically licked the boots of the Ayatollah for a nuclear deal that proved to be very flawed. This president saw the Ayatollah for who he is. He's a religious Nazi. They've been trying to build a nuclear weapon, not a nuclear power program for peaceful purposes. There's two groups that would use a nuclear weapon if they could get it: ISIS, Al-Qaeda types, and the Iranian regime. This president with Pompeo sees through the smokescreen. And they understand that the Iranian regime is an enemy of the world, not just the Iranian people. And with an effort to reimpose sanctions and an information campaign informing the Iranian people of how badly they're being treated, I think we can bring this regime down. And if you could replace the Iranian regime with something better, and almost anything would be better, it'd be the biggest change in the Mideast in my lifetime. Probably be the biggest accomplishment any president could have since the end of the Cold War.
And we all know about the power vacuum when there isn't a backup plan after individuals leave who have been dictators or theocrats in one way or another. Okay, so let's talk about the Supreme Court nomination.
Yes.
You sit on the Judiciary Committee. Judge Kavanaugh is making his way through the Hill.
Right.
Now there are two meetings with Democrats, at least two that we know of on the schedule, that are going to happen. But here is what the lead Democrat in the Senate says about the nominee.
If Kavanaugh would have let Nixon off the hook, what is he willing to do for President Trump? Alarm bells should be going off for anyone who believes in checks and balances.
In the meantime, you have a Republican colleague, Senator Rand Paul, who says he's undecided on Kavanaugh. He wants to stop and wait and see. You need every vote to stick together. It's going to happen.
There is no way in hell that Rand Paul is going to be the deciding vote to stop Kavanaugh from going to the court. He's the most qualified person the president could have picked. He has an outstanding resume. He's been a judge for over a decade now. He's a conservative. He is a home run pick. There'll be more than a handful of Democrats voting for this guy because they'll lose their seat if they don't, and Rand Paul is not going to be the deciding vote. He might vote no if Democrats give him cover, but there's no way he's going to deny Kavanaugh a seat on the Supreme Court because he's just too well qualified.
Well, and every vote will count on that front. Thank you for covering a lot of topics with us tonight, Senator. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Well, the president's fighting back tonight at his former attorney, Michael Cohen, after the leak of a taped conversation the two had, appearing to discuss buying the rights to a Playboy model's story of an alleged affair with the president. Ellison Barber is tracking all the twists and turns and joins us with the latest. Good evening, Ellison.
Good evening to you. So the Wall Street Journal has a new report out tonight on this as well. They're saying that Michael Cohen secretly recorded CNN Chris Cuomo earlier this year, and that Cohen reportedly talked about arranging the hush payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels, telling Cuomo, "I did it on my own." The Wall Street Journal also breaking news related to the tape we've already heard. Citing a source familiar with the matter, the Journal reports that Cohen created a shell company in September of 2016 with the intention of buying the rights to Karen McDougal's story. McDougal and Daniels say they had affairs with Trump. Federal investigators seized 12 audio items when they raided Michael Cohen's office in April. The now public Cohen-Trump recording has led to a number of questions and a number of responses. Today, Twitter responses from the president, his personal lawyer, and Cohen's lawyer. In the Oval Office, a CNN correspondent tried to ask President Trump about Cohen and the tape.
Mr. President, did Michael Cohen betray you?
That's Caitlin Collins.
Why has Vladimir Putin not accepted your invitation, Mr. President?
The president did not answer her questions, but according to Collins and CNN, the White House banned her from an open press event because of those questions. CNN says, quote, Collins was told by White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications Bill Shine and Press Secretary Sarah Sanders that her questions were inappropriate. They were not. Just because the White House is uncomfortable with the question regarding the news of the day doesn't mean the question isn't relevant and shouldn't be asked. The White House Correspondents Association says the administration's behavior here is inappropriate, wrong-headed, and weak, and that it cannot stand. But the White House is not backing down. In a statement, Sanders says a reporter refused to leave when asked, and, quote, our staff informed her she was not welcome to participate in the next event, but made clear that any other journalist from her network could attend. And as for Fox News, we stand with Caitlin Collins and CNN on this. In a statement, Fox News President Jay Wallace said, quote, we stand in strong solidarity with CNN for the right to full access for our journalists as part of a free and unfettered press. Shannon?
Another interesting day at the White House.
Always.
All right, thank you, Ellison. Okay, now for live reaction to all of these stories. Fox News contributor and former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. Governor, good to have you with us tonight. I find it interesting that even critics of the president say in this recorded tape, it doesn't necessarily show any wrong or criminal doing. Laney Davis, Politico said this about him. Laney Davis, of course, now representing Michael Cohen, links back to the Clintons back in the 90s and beyond. They say Davis, who served as special counsel to then President Bill Clinton in the late 1990s, argues Wednesday morning that while the tape offers little in terms of evidence of a crime, it gets to the lies and truth of the president and his team. Governor, why do you think it's leaked? Why is it out there?
You know, I honestly, when I first heard there were going to be some tapes, I thought, oh boy, this will be an explosive story. Then when I heard the tapes, my reaction was, gee, where's Geraldo and Al Capone's vault? I mean, there's nothing in there. And it really was such a, I guess, a letdown, if you will, because the story had been hyped as something just absolutely mind-boggling, and it wasn't. And I don't think it did any damage to the president, and especially if you listen to people who are objective, which are very few when it comes to this president, people like Professor Alan Dershowitz, who say there was nothing there that was criminal, nothing impeachable. This was a conversation, and it shouldn't have been recorded. It was played, and nothing came from it.
Well, and they seem to be trying to signal to the White House or to the president that Cohen has more tapes, that there may be more to come. And this edition from Laney Davis in the New York Times, it says that he told the Times on Tuesday night that Mr. Cohen released the tape because he is, quote, on a new path. It's a reset button to tell the truth and to let the chips fall where they may. Is that supposed to be a warning for the president?
I'm sure it may be intended that way. But I think every one of us need to be more concerned about the fact that God is recording every word we say and will be accountable for it than if a lawyer happens to record certain conversations. But that's privileged information, and I think he's going to have a hard time convincing judges, if they look at this from a legal standpoint, that this is somehow okay for a lawyer to release information that was considered to be private and never, ever intended for a public audience.
Yeah, God's reading our texts and our emails too, but I also assume somebody in the government is, so you have to watch everything that you say and think, because somebody's monitoring it at all times. Now, I want to talk to you about another very serious case we've talked about before, this idea of imprisoning a U.S. pastor who's lived in Turkey for decades and has led a congregation there. He's being accused by by the administration there of all kinds of wrongdoing and nefarious activities, all of which he vehemently denies. Here is his daughter speaking out yesterday.
My father is now dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression, and he's been permanently changed by this experience. Even when this ordeal is over, he'll never be the same person that he was. That being said, I cannot tell you how proud I am of my father and what an example of Christ's love he continues to be.
So we got word today that he has been moved out of jail into home confinement, or at least allowed to go home, but this trial's not going away. What do you make of it, Governor?
Well, he's got until October in home arrest, then he goes to trial. He may get out. Let's hope he does. This is a totally trumped up charge by the Turks. I think we all got to understand, Erdogan is not a guy that we can trust. I'm worried that he's in NATO. I'm worried that we have to deal with him as if he's a friend, and he's not. And his imprisonment has been called into question, thankfully, by the president, by the vice president, and by the Secretary of State. And they have pushed hard, and if it were not for them, Pastor Brunson would still be in a very pathetic prison. So thank God we have some administration officials at the highest levels who care about people who are being politically imprisoned.
Yeah, and it's great to see bipartisan agreement in the Senate to push back on Turkey on this as well. Governor, always great to see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
All right, late breaking news. Articles of impeachment drafted and introduced against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Catherine Herridge joins us with details.
We're tired of the Justice Department giving us the finger and not giving us the information.
And we'll be joined live by House Freedom Caucus member Ron DeSantis to get his take when we return.